Today's lecture is not about difficult people. It is about something far more unsettling. It is about a pattern, a recurring, almost predictable structure of human behavior, where the people closest to you become the ones who quietly undermine you the most. This is not accidental. This is not rare. And more importantly, this is not personal. If you have ever experienced this in your family, your workplace, your social circles, then what you encountered was not simply a bad individual. You encountered a system, the illusion of good people. Let us begin with a critical observation. The individuals who slow your growth, weaken your opportunities, or subtly erode your confidence rarely look like villains. In fact, they often appear reasonable, sometimes even supportive. Psychology categorizes them in several ways: vulnerable narcissists, passive-aggressive personalities, inferiority-driven aggressors. But labels are not the point, because here is the uncomfortable truth. These individuals are not strangers. They are disproportionately people who are close to you. And that raises a more important question. Why does proximity increase cruelty? The structural difference, east versus west. To answer this, we must step beyond individual psychology and examine structure. In highly hierarchical societies such as Korea, social comparison is vertically organized. Education, income, family background, these are not just personal attributes. They are coordinates in a ranking system. So when someone rises, it is not perceived as isolated success. It is interpreted as structural disruption. In such environments, direct confrontation is less common. Instead, what emerges is something more subtle: indirect suppression, reputation minimization, relationship interference. This is what we might call invisible pressure. Now contrast this with Western societies. Here, competition is more individualized. Attacks are more direct. Competition is more explicit. Collective suppression is weaker. So the cruelty looks different. Not absent, just differently expressed. The East hides it. The West shows it. Cruelty evolves across generations. Now here is a critical insight that most people miss. The nature of cruelty does not disappear over time. It evolves. The psychological core remains the same, but its expression changes with age and environment. Let's break this down. 1. The 20s, 30s, psychological warfare. This generation operates within a hyper-visible comparison system, primarily driven by social media. But here's the nuance. They rarely attack directly. Instead, they engage in subtle signaling of success, indirect criticism, strategic exclusion of information or opportunities. On the surface, everything looks calm, but underneath, there is constant psychological tension. The defining trait of this group is silent competition, invisible warfare. 2. The 40s, 50s, relational power. At this stage, the game changes. This is no longer about emotion. It becomes about leverage. Networks are activated. Opportunities are filtered. Narratives are shaped. Here, influence replaces expression, and something more dangerous appears: invisible power. Outcomes are decided before conflicts even become visible. 3. The 60s and above, moral control. At this level, competition is no longer explicit at all. Instead, the battlefield shifts to values. Norms are enforced. Traditions are invoked. Legitimacy is questioned. This is not an attack on your actions. It is an attack on your right to act. And that is far more powerful. Because when legitimacy is removed, resistance becomes socially invalid. This stage can be summarized as control through moral framing. One core truth. Across all these variations, there is one unchanging principle. Cruelty does not disappear. It refines itself. The moment you understand this, your perception shifts. You stop analyzing individuals, and you begin to see patterns, a deeper layer, the human condition. Ancient philosophical traditions have long recognized this. One such perspective describes human suffering as rooted in 3 forces: ignorance, attachment, jealousy. Jealousy in particular is not seen as a simple emotion. It is defined as an inability to tolerate another person's light. When someone else succeeds, it creates a psychological contradiction. If they rise, what does that mean about me? And rather than resolving that tension internally, many people resolve it externally by pulling the other person down. The hidden mechanism, indirect threat. Now we move into a more precise framework. Most people assume that conflict requires direct competition. This is incorrect. Human beings operate within rank hierarchies. Even if someone is not directly competing with you, their success can still affect your perceived position. This is known as indirect threat. If they move up, I move down relatively. And the human brain reacts to relative loss almost as strongly as actual loss. Why third parties are the most dangerous. Now we arrive at the most critical insight of this lecture. The most dangerous individuals are not your direct competitors. They are the third parties. Why? Because they operate under three conditions. 1. No responsibility for outcomes. 2. Minimal relational risk. 3. Low cost of emotional expression. This creates a perfect environment for what we call low-cost aggression, maximum emotional output, minimal personal consequence. This is why third parties spread doubt, amplify conflict, undermine trust, not because they must, but because they can. The sociology of suppression. From a sociological perspective, this behavior is not random. It is a form of group defense. Every social group maintains an implicit boundary. Do not exceed our level. Why? Because upward deviation destabilizes the comparison system. So the group responds, often unconsciously, by applying pressure. This is known as regression pressure toward the mean. Final conclusion. Let us distill everything into one sentence. The people who obstruct you are not anomalies. They are statistically inevitable. And here is the part most people fail to anticipate. The more you grow, the more clearly you will see them. Not because they suddenly appear, but because your movement activates the structure they were always part of. Strategic response. At this point, emotional reactions are counterproductive. What is required is strategic clarity. Understand, but do not internalize. Analyze, but do not attempt to persuade. Recognize, but do not remain close. Because this is the final rule. These patterns do not change. In the next lecture, we will go further. We will quantify this phenomenon. What percentage of people actively obstruct others? How does this differ between cultures? What probability structure are you actually living in? Because at the highest level, this is no longer psychology. It is data. If this lecture has sharpened your perception, then support this work by subscribing, sharing, and engaging. Because understanding structure is the first step toward freedom from it.